Today we are doing an interview about the poem Interconnectedness by Wally Swists, and I have my interviewee here, Caitlin. So first I'm going to start off by reading the poem to you. So, is this connected to everything else, you ask, venerable explorer of supreme consciousness, cloud watcher and observer of what wind does to leafy branches in the tree break? Although now you look only at objects in your room on a locked board, the titles of books I've turned so they display their identities. When you ask the metaphysical question regarding connectivity, Whitman saw what you're seeing, the cosmos in a leaf of green grass. You no longer loaf and invite your soul, but you do see the one in the all. Basho's frog leaping before the pond splash. Buddha's guidance about the finger pointing at the moon, whereas the finger guides us as teaching and the moon radiates pure mind. Whenever you ask your finger pointing, often from a page of a book I'm reading to you, whether the French toast I'm feeding you for breakfast, to the tulips behind the glass in the photograph on the wall, and whether they're connected, I pause thoughtfully and look at you with as much kindness I can muster and announce, since I am convinced by now, yes, I believe they are. So, I just want to get your first thoughts on this poem, like just reading it first.
My first impression of the poem has to be that, I don't want to say it was dragged, but it was like you never really felt a main point of the poem till the end, per se, which I guess if this is truly trying to get like a point across, then maybe that should be, in most scenarios, that should be probably your first thing that you do is get the point across instead of waiting till the end. I guess is really where I was like, okay, like, I guess this man believes, everything in life feeds into the next. And it was kind of hard to grasp that, so I think maybe it was more of like a sloppy form of a poem than.
I honestly agree. I believe it just really talked about like everything being connected to everything else, just like the first sentence where it's like, is this connected to everything you ask or everything else you ask?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end where it's like the French toast, the photograph on the wall, and how that's all connected.
I felt like that was the first point where you understood what he meant by it.
Yeah. All right. So with it being like about like how everything is connected and everything has like just like some sort of connection, even if it's like in a random way, do you relate to that in any way, or like have you ever felt anything that has happened for a reason, or like just connected?
In my life, I don't really think that things actually are connected. Like, I wouldn't say like inanimate objects per se, like he was referring to in the poem. I wouldn't think the pen I'm holding has anything to do with my dinner that I ate tonight. I wouldn't say things like that. I think that was almost silly, but I definitely do think things happen for a reason. For example, I had to move to South Carolina. It was probably the worst thing I've ever done, but then I found this school, and it was something that I would have never found if I didn't move. So then it was like, you know what, like it happened for a reason. And then I'm at this school, and I'm happy I'm at this school, so like that happened for a reason. Hold on, I'm choking.
Okay.
I'm not even kidding.
So I agree that everything, like just like the physical aspects of it, like the French toast and how the photograph on the wall and I don't really understand how it's connected. But I was also thinking, like, maybe the French toast has a deeper meaning. Like, whoever, like, made the French toast, maybe. Like, his mother or, like, his daughter. And it has, like, how his mother or daughter has something to do with the photograph on the wall. If that makes sense, the way that I put it.
I don't think I thought of it that way, and that could be absolutely true.
Mm-hmm. So, like, not, like, the physical objects itself.
Yeah.
But, all right. Next question. Did any imagery in this poem stick with you in any way?
I guess he used a good bit. You know, maybe the frog leaping and the flower, the French toast. Like, it wasn't deep imagery, but it was just clear enough for you to be like, you know, like, just a lot of describing words here. We're seeing, like, the green grass and the moon.
Yeah.
It was like, I guess, was constantly describing, per se, his scenery. And it was, like, very clear of what, you know, he wanted. So, the one thing to point out would maybe be him talking about the Buddha. I mean, I guess it's, like, maybe important imagery, but for me, like, I think that's not something, me and you, I know personally, we can't point that out. I don't know what he's talking about. I'm not Buddhist. I don't know that reference, what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that in Christianity, we actually have a reference that's kind of similar to that. But it's not like I don't really know what his connection to that is, like, where he's trying to get with that. So it's kind of like, sure, maybe that's good for some people to, like, be like, oh, I'm just picturing what he's saying, but I can't picture what he's talking about right now. That has no meaning to me. So I don't know if he had a good use of imagery or just used it a lot, you know?
Yeah, I agree. It's just, like, kind of
There.
yeah. All right. Did the lack of rhyming in this poem confuse you or, like, enable you to understand it?
I don't think the rhyming had to do with my confusion. Something I find about rhyming is, like, sometimes I think when we tend to try to rhyme, that's when it can get confusing, because it's like you might, like, be sitting here grasping for anything that rhymes, and then it's like, that doesn't really make sense to the actual poem itself. So I think that was maybe, like, a good thing he didn't try to rhyme, but also at the same time, like I said, like, I guess it was the lack of knowing, maybe, on, like, my part. I didn't really understand his Buddha reference and the moon and this and that. Like, it's not, you know, I think overall the poem was a little confusing to, like, what he was meaning, and I think it's just, I guess maybe that's just about poetry, and that's, you know, we have to, like, really use our mind to dig into what it means to us, and maybe ask and figure out what it means to him, because overall I didn't think it was clear. I don't think with or without rhyming would have been any clearer. I think he has his own way, and maybe this is just his thoughts on page, you know.
Yeah. So Wally, he actually does a lot of his poems are, like, similar in this way. It's like they're all basically about just, like, everything being connected.
Okay.
Of that sort. And just a little bit about him. He supposedly went to Yale University, but unfortunately he did not get back to my email or anything, or I couldn't find any, like, research about him. But it says supposedly he went to Yale University, and he had a Master of Fine Arts in Poetry. And yeah, he did work at the bookstore in Yale. Little fun facts. But he was just born in Connecticut. But yeah. Okay, so for, like, the Buddha reference, do you think he was trying to, like, connect this to his religion possibly, or do you think it was, like, significant in the poem at all, or just thrown in there?
I guess it was probably one of the only things, not one of the only things, but one of the main things that, like, stood out to me in the poem. Just because I think, I mean, for me at least, it's like, your religion is part of your daily life. It's something that's important to you. So it obviously was important enough for him to put in this poem. And so I'm like, maybe this is why he believes in the things that he believes in, because once again, I don't know anything about Buddhism. Like, I'm not sure what they believe, what they teach. And so quite frankly, maybe they do teach that everything has reason, everything happens. Like, I mean, for me, like, my God is why everything happens. And it's like, everything is meant to be, and it's like you have to believe that. It's like maybe his religion is like everything is connected, and that's why he wanted to add that in, to be like, this is why I feel this way, this is my spiritual connection to this. And I mean, I guess that's kind of just how the whole poem is, and like you said, his other things, like he's just a very spiritual person, and maybe he wants other people to understand that, or like connect to certain like groups of people and see if they enjoy it. So yeah, I do think it was pretty significant.
Yeah, and he also used the reference Basho's frog, which, since you're not familiar with the Buddhist religion,
Buddhism.
I
I
did
think
some.
that's it.
No.
Buddhism.
Yeah, Buddhism.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the Buddhism religion, but I did some research, and Basho's frog is like their like interpretation of like nature and all things being like interconnected in their own way. So I assume that's why he threw it in there.
Or yeah, and I guess like once again that kind of makes sense to why he believes this.
Yeah.
So for me, like going back to what I just said about like the religion, I honestly think this was his whole basis. Like, did you also feel that way reading this poem, or did you have a different interpretation of it?
I think the whole poem was just pretty much about how it says like everything is connected, and how it asks the question of like, is everything connected to everything else at the beginning?
Right.
And then he just goes through all of this and explains how he believes that everything is connected. You know, and it's like, I'm not sure if you ever heard of the butterfly effect, but it is just like, okay, so I'm not sure if you've ever heard the term the butterfly effect. Have you?
I mean, yeah, but like it's not something like I'm familiar with. I just heard of it.
Okay, so it's basically how just like small insignificant events can have a much larger and unpredictable, like not outrageous outcome, but like just a big consequence over however period of time. And I really just think that he doesn't really talk about the butterfly effect in general, but I feel like it has to do with it, just how like everything's connected. Maybe not like cause like consequences per chance, but just like it's just a reason. Like this falls, so this happens. And like I was reading, and it was just talking about how like a butterfly, how it's like called butterfly effect. You know, how like a butterfly flapping its wings, and like let's say North America, the wind of the butterfly can cause like a tornado in Africa or something. Yeah, which I just think is really interesting to put that into perspective.
And you think that has some more relation to like the poem's theme overall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that was just basically a little overview of the poem Interconnectedness by Wally Swists. And yeah, thank you for watching. Should we wait until 25 minutes? Okay, so I'll be doing an interview with Andrew about the poem Interconnectedness by Wally Swists. And I'm going to start off by reading the poem to you.
Okay.
So, is this connected to everything else, you ask, venerable explorer of supreme consciousness, cloud watcher and observer of what wind does to leafy branches in the tree break? Although now you look only at objects in your room on a locked ward, the titles of books I've turned so they display their identities. When you ask the metaphysical question regarding connectivity, Whitman saw what you're saying, the cosmos and a leaf of green grass. You no longer loaf and invite your soul, but you do see the one in the all. Basho's frog leaping before the pond splash, Buddha's guidance about the finger pointing at the moon, whereas the finger guides us as teaching and the moon radiates pure mind. Whenever you ask your finger pointing, often from a page of a book I'm reading to you, whether the French toast I'm feeding you for breakfast, to the tulips behind the glass and the photograph on the wall, and whether they're connected. I pause thoughtfully and look at you with as much kindness I could muster, and announce, since I am convinced by now, yes, I believe they are. So what are what are your first thoughts of this poem?
My first thoughts on the poem was that the author did a good job with, keeping. I don't know. Take another cut.
Poet, not author. It's he. Wally's he.
What do you want me to say?
The poet, or he, or him, or they.
So I'm going to say imagery. Imagery are the describing words to use to explain.
Yes, imagery in poems.
Okay.
And imagery. And then use some examples of imagery.
But I can't just remember them all.
Okay, we'll just take two. Don't end it. Okay. So, what are your first thoughts of this poem?
My first thoughts on the poem was that the poet did a good job using imagery to try and get his point across to his audience. And I thought, he did a...
End it right there. It's good. Let's go right there. Okay. So, what do you think this poem is trying to say? Like the major point that it is trying to get across?
I think...
All right. So, what do you think?
Ready? Go.
So, what do you think the major point that this poet is trying to get across to you?
I think the main point that this poet's trying to get across is really just that everything is connected amongst one another, and how everything's just related in a way.
Okay.